Yeah, so we've got recording on, so anything that anyone says, obviously, well, that can be part of the recording. So let's get started. So we're going to do, yeah, probably 15 to 20 minutes on the subject, and then open to questions. And we're going to look at an example of a commercial to residential conversion. We're going to be looking at one, in fact, that's theoretically about to start within a few days. This is a joint venture that we've set up, and we're hopefully at completion. Because yeah, lenders, solicitors, they're always asking for things and things and things, and so we are the last run of that. So this evening we're going to be talking about unlocking profit in commercial to residential conversions. So there are a lot of opportunities getting good profit on projects like this. Interesting question as well that people might ask is how much profit for a project to be viable or worth doing. A commercial to residential conversion, in reality, it's a development project. Even if we're taking a building that exists and just doing some reconfiguration work, we're doing development, and the aim is to do that to make a reasonable profit. The same as if we're like doing something building from ground up. And generally the benchmark is to do a project if you've got a minimum of 20% expected profit on GDV. So not on the actual purchase and build cost, but on the final price. So if we've got, for example, a GDV of 1 million, then 20% of 1 million is 200,000. And ideally, we'd be looking at 250,000. So we'll be wanting on a project with a GDV of 1 million for the purchase and the development to not cost more than 750,000. Sometimes there can be different ways of looking at it, especially if the aim is to hold for ongoing income and we've got like really good income, but that's like a rule of thumb for the profit that we're aiming at. And commercial to residential conversions can be lucrative, and we're able, in quite a lot of cases, to achieve that level of profit, which makes it worth it. And yeah, enables us to get, in reality, most of the money out. Because if we're talking about 25% profit and loans at loan to value 75%, then that is basically an all money out deal. So that's good for good for us if we're doing them, and if we're doing them as joint ventures, it's obviously good for the investors as well. It's giving a bit more juicy returns than like on standard buy-to-lets and things like that. So why convert from commercial to residential? So the first thing we've already spoken about, increase property value and profit potential. Yeah, converting commercial units into residential can significantly enhance their value, especially when we're looking at some things like, we're going to look at examples, but for example, hotels. Not the case in central London, but if you're looking in provincial towns, we sometimes find, like I was looking at one in a town in South Wales, where I think approximately it was something like 2,500 square meters, and the price per square meter was 750. Whereas the average price per square meter, like for example, for a flat in that area will be something like 1,800. So on something like that, as long as we're able to do the conversion at reasonable cost, let's say 500 to 600, if it's just like internal reconfiguration, then that's a really good profit. So yeah, profit potential. There's a big demand, we all know that, for housing. So generally it's when we're converting to residential, our exit strategies are sort of fairly reliable, as long as we're doing something at market price and doing it to a good standard, then we've got probably no problem in selling it. The only thing that we need to bear in mind is have a little look at how the market is going up and down, and not have to sell fast when the market is a little bit down. This thing here, which I call versatile opportunity size, is for I'm going to say developers or people like us. Obviously, we're all maybe at different stages in doing property, but I don't think, well, in general in the group we haven't got people that are doing like blocks of 100 flats and big projects like that. And quite a few people in the group are looking to do things more than your standard like buy to let or your standard HMO conversion, for example. And in reality, there aren't that many people looking for this like medium-sized deal, like it could be some old pub or a large bank that we can convert into 4, 5, or 6 flats. It's not interesting for the bigger developers, and it's out of range of, let's say, a lot of local builders who are looking to buy houses to renovate. So there's actually quite a lot of opportunities out there, and so like less demand means we can go in and get projects at good prices. And then this last thing here, repurposing underused buildings, is obviously good and benefiting for the community when there are all these empty buildings, and bringing them back to life. It's like pleasure in doing that. So here are some examples of what are commercial properties that can potentially be converted. So office buildings. So that is, we don't need to go into detail. Just one thing about office buildings. Sometimes office buildings are very deep. In other words, like that might be wide, but also very deep. And that can give problems for getting light in the middle of the building. So we can have issues with how much really usable space. We can have, obviously, we'll put things like services and bathrooms and things there, but that is a consideration. Retail spaces, so these can be shops. Banks are quite popular because there's a lot of banks that are closing on the high streets. Warehouses and industrial units. This is maybe a little more rare, because a lot of areas, if they're like industrial units in an industrial area, then it's not permitted to change them into residential. But sometimes when they're character like warehouses on the that are like on the edge, or actually even in town centres, then there can be good opportunities for conversion to residential. The issue there is typically it's a warehouse. It can be almost the same cost as doing a new build, because we've got probably a lot of structural work to do on them. And sometimes as well, when they're like sort of these nice warehouses, the owners think that they're worth 2 or 3 times the amount that they're really worth. And then we've got hotels and former public buildings. Hotels in town centres can be good. Yeah, as I mentioned before, really good. Oh, sorry, there's someone in the waiting room. Yeah, so hotels can be, yeah, sorry, Sam, I only just saw you in the waiting room. So yeah, hotels can be really good candidates for converting into residential, especially when we're able to get them at quite low prices on a price per square meter. And also hotels generally, if they have like en suites and things, they've already got most of the plumbing and things in place. Obviously, some reconfiguration to do. Planning and permitted development rights. So it's not a course on details of planning, but in a lot of cases, and it's actually almost surprising what is possible to do under permitted development. So it's possible to convert offices. So it could be quite a large block of offices into into flats without having to go through full planning. So this can reduce the risks and it can reduce the delays in getting things underway. But we need to be careful of local authority restrictions and Article 4 directions. Article 4 directions, we often talk about Article 4 with respect to HMOs, which are restricting converting a house into an HMO. But Article 4 basically can mean any restriction on permitted development rights. So if you're thinking about buying a bank on a high street and converting it under permitted development, then we need to check that obviously with a local planner. And if we're in Wales, unfortunately, there's virtually no permitted development. There's almost nothing that you can do in Wales. Well, nothing that a developer can do under permitted development. For example, there, if you've got a mixed-use unit, so you've got a shop that's got, for example, 2 or 3 floors above it that are used like as offices, you could convert it into one flat, shop and one flat, but nothing else. So in general, we want at least 2 or 3 flats, and in which case we're going into full planning. But having said that, when it's like that's the case, then if you're consulting with a planning consultant, it's a standard thing, and as long as you're like following the rules, it shouldn't be a blocking point for doing commercial to residential conversions. Regulations and compliance will gloss over this. Obviously, building regulations, fire safety have to be fully analysed and need to comply with all that. When we're looking at how many flats we can squeeze into our commercial space, we do need to take into account minimum space standards. And here, because we're doing a conversion of something that isn't residential, then it's the national space standards that apply. And those standards are bigger than the HMO standards that most people are familiar with. So for example, if it's going to be a single bedroom, it's not 6.5, I think it's 7.5. And if it's a double bedroom, it's something like 12 square meters that is needed. So keep that in mind. And also remember, it's not like a hard and fast rule, but generally mortgage lenders don't like lending on flats that are less than 35 square meters. So be careful about squeezing too much in. But we've got the alternative sometimes of doing blocks of service apartments. So we can actually, if we're doing service apartments, that's actually not really commercial to residential. It's commercial to commercial, because we're going from one commercial use class to another. And interestingly, that cannot be done under permitted development. That has to be done under full planning. And accessibility infrastructure, that's all part of the planning. Are the requirements to have parking spaces for each flat? That may be the case, or if we're in a city centre with good transport links, we might be able to get away without having that. Costing and funding options. Obviously, these are generally a higher cost than standard buying a house, renovating it and refinancing it. So we've got obviously purchasing the property, we've got the renovation and conversion costs, and we've got legal fees. Legal fees can be end up being quite a bit higher. Obviously, a nice thing when we're getting doing commercial to residential is that it's commercial stamp duty. So stamp duty is quite a lot less than residential stamp duty. And interestingly, when we're doing buying mixed use, we can have a property that's got a tiny shop and a large amount of residential space, as long as it's on the same title, then it's commercial stamp duty. So what are the options for financing commercial to residential? And it can be a combination of all of these. So one is like using bridging loans. So bridging loans can cover part of the purchase cost and generally all of the conversion and renovation costs. Obviously, whatever the loans, we still need to have the deposit money, which will be, if it's a bridging loan, typically it's going to be 30% of the purchase cost. And we need to be able to fund upfront the first tranche of the development costs. Because even if the bank is covering the development costs, funds will only be released when the first part has been done. And then joint ventures are often popular and really good possibilities in the case of commercial to residential conversions for two reasons. One is generally, if we're doing a commercial to residential conversion, we don't generally have like massive risks of a new build, unless it's like a really complicated thing like converting a warehouse. But if it's a structure that exists and we've got a clear idea of the costs, then it's a lower risk for joint venture partners. And then the other big advantage is that we've generally got really good profit on these properties. So there's enough margin to give a good return to the joint venture partner and have still a good return on the developer side. Some of the key challenges and risks. This thing here about structural integrity and hidden costs. If we're converting like old buildings or buildings that may need a lot of work, we need to have good contingencies against things that we might end up finding during the build, or we need to spend more money doing more surveys and maybe some partially destructive exploration to check things. And then, all the financial risks is more a question of cost overruns, and in particular when we're using bridging, being very careful that we can complete the work in time and either sell or get the refinance. So to make sure at the beginning that the bridging is long enough. So step-by-step process. Obviously, we're looking for the property and we're doing a feasibility study. Quite likely, we're going to be looking at maybe 4 or 5 properties to find one that has got good figures and is going to give us that 20 or 25% profit. Then we're doing obviously planning, design and architectural work, construction, right through to at the end, obviously, when we're doing our feasibility study, almost always we start at the end. We start at what is the end value going to be and what are we going to do with it? Are we going to be selling them? If we're going to sell them, how are we going to be marketing them? Are we going to be staging them? Or are we going to keep them and refinance? And a nice thing with when we're creating multiple flats from a commercial unit, we can do a mix of things. So we can say we're going to, for example, sell 2 of them, keep 2 of them for ourselves, maybe refinance 1 of them, So we can, yeah, like look at the different possibilities and choose how we're going to do it at the end of the day. And here are some, yeah, examples that we've already touched on: offices to apartments, warehouses to like loft style residence. Typical thing there is like the standard like mill buildings from the industrial age. A lot of cities or towns, especially up in the north, have these massive brick built mills, and when they're not that far from the city centre, can be ideal candidates for conversion. But as long as it's possible to get them at a good price, and also they need to be in a city where the end prices are high enough to justify the cost of works. And then retail space to mixed use. This is when we've got, like, for example, a shop. It could be a large shop or block of shops, but it might be on 2 or 3 floors. It might be on a high street and we need to keep the ground floor as commercial, which is fine, and then convert the upper floors into residential. So there we're calling that mixed use development. Yeah, a few final thoughts, and then we're going to open up to questions. So yeah, there's 2 ways of getting into commercial to residential conversions: either fully hands-on, where we find the projects. It does need a bit of experience. If you haven't done any property before, it's best to do some like standard things like buying below market value, adding value, renovating a house, and either selling it or refinancing it. Maybe doing an HMO, and then thinking about commercial to residential conversions. Or the hands-off approach is when, yeah, you understand the value of a good commercial to residential conversion. You're able to do due diligence and, yeah, look at people such as myself from time to time. We've got joint ventures in this area, and yeah, look at coming on board to get the relatively high returns without doing anything. But don't go into something like that blindly. Look carefully at the figures. Yeah, so getting started, proper market research, networking. Yeah, we need like bigger network of people when we're starting doing things like that, because we're going to have legal questions, planning questions, property management, how are we going to sell them. So yeah, it's like a stage where we're like building up our contacts so we can discuss with different people. Yeah, and consider joint ventures. It can also be sometimes joint ventures between 2 developers or property investors. Different things are possible. So that is the main content on the subject. I'll go back to the previous slide because it's got a bit of final thoughts. So let's open it up to questions for maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then to finish, I'm going to share a bit of yeah, information and discussion about a joint venture project that we're about to get underway on a commercial to residential conversion.
Trevor, it's Vatsal here. Just on what you said partway through the presentation, and this fits in that bracket of small scale development, i.e., above HMO house related projects and below the threshold that serious developers will look at stuff. But
We
with
can
the
still be serious if we're doing small things, by the way.
sorry.
We can still be serious if we're doing small things.
Yeah, no. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
yeah. If I just get to the question, the 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 government initiatives to try and provide more housing, is that are there any changes afoot to affect um provision of affordable units when you've got developments of a certain scale? Is there something I know there's a SIL which the community infrastructure levy that the rules vary, don't they, from authority to authority?
Yeah, they're very massively, yes.
Yeah, but is that likely to change, Trevor? I'm just curious. I don't know if you know the answer to that
Well,
question.
from things that we're seeing, these changes are probably not going to affect massively, like small scale developers doing things like I'm talking about here. It's more like yeah, big developers who want to build 500 houses on land that they've like stocked and that hitherto haven't been able to get planning permission, or hasn't been a high enough value. So, I mean, there's the advantage that obviously when there's developments are of a larger scale, then there can be requirements for affordable housing, which basically make the project unprofitable. Whereas when we're at this scale, generally there aren't yet requirements for affordable housing. And as well, because we're doing conversions as well, quite often we can sort of get away from that. So yeah, generally on this sort of thing, we like get it. What might help a little is that because of the general consensus of needing to build more residential properties, maybe planning might get a little simpler, or there's maybe less risk of planning being refused as long as it ticks all the boxes. In other words, as long as it follows the planning policy. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question, Trev.
Yeah.
You haven't talked about, you haven't gone into detail about approaching, say, commercial agents in regard to some of the commercial properties. What's your strategy?
So we're a little bit, yeah, because generally commercial agents are surprisingly are selling commercial properties. And a lot of them with commercial agents are properties that are in industrial zones, for example, or commercial space, which are restricted under planning to be only commercial. And then, yeah, occasionally, yeah, there might be these shops or potential mixed units that are available via commercial agents. So, but these generally will be on market. So they'll be on obviously their websites that you got like Zoopla and Rightmove commercial, and the commercial agents are advertising on these sites. So it's possible to find commercial properties there as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's right. So, have you actually approached any commercial agents in regard to the discussion points, or you may come across a building that's suitable to convert from commercial to residential, maybe keeping the commercial and converting the uppers, and you've come across it on the commercial agent's website or via Rightmove, but it's a commercial property. So, have you actually approached any of the commercial agents in that regard?
In reality, in that regard, no. Because actually next week, the webinar is going to be on pure commercial,
Okay.
so buying commercial property. So we are in discussion. I'm doing this actually with a business partner who's got a lot of experience in basic commercial. He's a commercial surveyor, and he's started his own buying of commercial units. He's
Okay.
actually doing the equivalent of of HMOs, but in commercial. So it's like multi-occupied
Commercial to commercial.
commercial buildings,
Okay.
which can be quite lucrative. And occasionally, so ones that I've seen and looked at via brokers, in fact, have all been pure commercial. So it could have been like commercial units, some of which are on industrial estates, and I've got a mix of light industrial and office space, which can be really good deals, and we can apply some of the some of the strategies of adding value And with commercial as well, we've got the possibility of using what's called commercial finance and commercial valuations based on the actual income. So yeah, when getting into commercial properties, typically one of the key things that we look to do is increase the quality of the tenants, and also obviously the amounts that they're paying, optimize the occupancy as well, so that in 2 or 3 years we can go back and potentially get 30 or 40% extra out of the project, because it's the valuation is based on commercial yield and the income.
Okay, I look forward to
And
that.
sometimes when we're looking at these properties, we might come across one or two that do have potential for conversion. And there's also, and this is actually a good source in auction as well.
Yeah.
Quite often there's potential commercial to residential conversions in auction. And again, when they're at like the medium scale, like properties that may be 150, 200, 250 to buy, it's the bigger developers are not specifically spending time looking for them. And in auction, mainly it's people that have got experience in doing a single house renovation. They might be using auction bridge finance, in which case they'll stay away from commercial because that needs evaluation to be able to get the bridging, and it's very difficult to do that within the 28 days. So there can be some quite good opportunities, including also post-auction, because sometimes these properties don't sell in auction, and then obviously it's possible to go and get get a good deal. It maybe get a good price with respect to the asking price, and whether or not it's a good deal depends on looking at all the figures. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, no, I look forward to next week's episode if it's going to be more focused on the commercial. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and obviously commercial is, because I think yourself, Keith, you either have a SAS or you're obviously involved with people that have SAS pension funds. A SAS can obviously directly invest
Yeah.
in commercial properties.
Yeah,
And
that's what I've done. But I asked the question because a lot of the commercial agents are pain in the arse, to be honest.
in reality, it's true, but which is why things that I'm looking at with someone who's got really good experience in doing that.
Okay.
So when he's dealing with the commercial agents, he knows exactly how it works. He knows all the questions, and also it's worth doing things with people like that, even like you're paying them a fee or
Yeah.
giving them a bit of equity in the deal, because potentially even if you're giving them like 10% equity for setting up the deal, they'll probably get you 10 or 15% reduction on the price, because they know how to calculate the commercial yield, and they know how to go and say to the broker, look, you're asking for 850 based on the commercial yield and the income you've got at the moment, it should be 650.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not and there's probably as well with these commercial brokers, there's probably a lot of time wasters. People think that they might want to buy a commercial property, but don't know how to do it.
Right. Okay. I look forward to meeting this guy.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, what I'm going to do for probably 5 or 10 minutes, I'm going to share another screen. Unless there's someone wants to say something? All right, so I'm going to stop this share, and I'm going to bring up another one. Right, what this is this was a brochure that we did when we were promoting this project, but it's now we've got like investors on board, and we're about to complete, but it's taken a long time because yeah, there's often like complications in sorting out the funding and yeah, dealing with all the lenders' requirements, all the conveyancing to get it over the line. So what this is, so we can see a bit from the picture. So this is in a place called Chepstow, which is where I'm pointing with my mouse, which is just so it's in Wales, but just over. It's all, in fact, it's almost in England. It's on the border, and just over the Severn Bridge. So what this is historically, so probably like 30 years ago, it was a pub. Then bits have been added on from time to time, and currently it's classed as offices. So what it is on all of the ground floor, it's a print shop. So the people there got equipment. Well, there's no equipment in there because everything's been moved out, ready for completion. So it was a print shop. Part of the first floor had been unofficially converted into residential. I think the owners were using that to live. And we don't see very well, but behind here on the left, there's an extension of almost the same size, where there's two floors. There's a ground floor, and then there's a lower ground floor and gardens below. So when we looked at this project, this was actually advertised, coming back like to Keith's question, it was advertised by a normal estate agent. It wasn't advertised by a commercial agent. And it already had planning in place for conversion into a house and 2 flats. So obviously we did our calculations and put in an offer to buy it, which was accepted. And then we set up this one we did as a joint venture in order to yeah, bring in basically the deposit money to be able to get the project off the ground. And that's a common thing with developers. We've got the experience, we know how to do it. Sometimes we got some money from a project before we invest it into the next one. In this case, basically we needed all the money in from joint venture partners. So yeah, the joint venture partners come in and they get obviously an equal share of the profits. In this particular project, we're not planning on selling at the end because we're in a touristic region. We're on the border of the Forest of Dean. We're also quite close to Bristol as well. Our plan is, when we've completed this, is to refinance at the higher value and get obviously some of the money out, and then to hold it and operate as serviced accommodation. So like short-term accommodation, holiday lets. Because we've got a big building, which currently everything like communicates as like doors between the different parts, what we've planned is that we'll have the 3 separate units as per the planning permission, which is already in place. But we're going to be doing it so that everything can be opened up. So in fact, there's going to be a 4-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, and a 2-bedroom unit. And we can open all those up, use some of the lounges in the smaller units, because we've got like a 50 square meter lounge on the lower ground floor. Yeah, and then we can open that up to large groups. And when we haven't got large group bookings, we'd be able to yeah, open it up for individual unit bookings. So we already had the planning on that. And then we needed to determine whether the project was viable by seeing what it's going to be converted into. So here we've got a ground floor flat of 65 square meters, first floor flat of 85, and then what we call the house, which is over the ground floor and the lower ground floor, 125 square meters. We've got our estimated value on completion of works, which is based on sold prices in the area. And incidentally, this valuation has been backed up by a RICS evaluation. And the key figures to demonstrate that it is a good deal. We'll look at the percentages. So we negotiated a purchase price at 450. We've got 165,000 of conversion costs. So the total money in is 615 plus legals and lending costs. And there's a lot of, in reality, all those costs come to in the region of 10 to 12,000. Because when it's a commercial building, we've got commercial surveys that costs 2,000 each time. When we're doing conversions and we're using bridging to finance the development work, then the lender has to send in their own quantity surveyor to check what we're doing, to check our figures, and to determine whether, in this case, his budget of 165 was sufficient. In fact, it was. They did consider it sufficient, but even though we already had a contingency in there, they required us to add an additional contingency and add that to the borrowing. So if we look at the GDV of 850, 25% of that is just over 200,000. We probably have got something like 40 to 50,000 of finance costs on the bridging. So we are at around 23% profit if we go along with those figures on the GDV. And that's the type of thing that we'd expect on a project of this nature. And obviously we've done our figures on what income we're expecting to get operating it as serviced accommodation. And whenever we do a project, we always like coming back to this and like sort of insisting on it. We need to consider alternative exit strategies. So in reality, we've got on this project 3 viable exit strategies. The first exit strategy is what we plan on doing for the maximum income, which is refinance and operate as serviced accommodation. We've done our calculations on if we were to operate this as an HMO, or in fact 3 HMOs, and that also comes out good and gives reasonable level of profit. Not quite as much as serviced accommodation, but still worth doing. And if we were only going to be doing as an HMO, we'd probably still do the project. And then the third possibility, based on the calculations of renting out the units as like standard lets, it doesn't give enough income. It probably give like a standard yield of like 6 or 7%, and that's not like sort of interesting for us. So the third exit strategy would be to sell the units and take the profit. So that's an overall look at a commercial to residential conversion, and all being well, probably in a week or 2 we'll actually have the keys to this, and we'll be able to start breaking things and then making things in there. And if this does go ahead, we'll be sharing some of the progress from time to time on the group. There's on here as well, there's the plans. So we can see we've got 3 floors on there. So the ground floor, which is going to have 1 flat stopping, this is a division between the ground floor flat. But to make them communicate, we're actually going to be building a little corridor along here and a door between the 2 units. And then we've got the first floor, which is a flat. And then we've got the lower ground floor, which has got a really nice conservatory going on to this area, which is going to be about 50 square meters of common, common space, like if it's for big groups. So I'm going to stop on that, unless someone has any question about this specific project. This is like really a typical example, because although it was offices, it could have been already a pub, could potentially have been a small hotel. And yeah, this is typically the sort of thing. In this one, we've got 3 units in it, and depending on the size, could be more. Any questions? Right, well, we're finishing 8 minutes.
Trevor, sorry.
Oh, we've got a question about some?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to keep everyone on.
That's okay.
So a couple of questions actually. So the asking was 500 and you bought at 450.
Yes.
What was the motivation for the seller to drop to a low price?
I'm smiling here because I said because we told them it could be a quick sale. In the end, it took 9 months. But that
Okay.
was because of, in fact, what happened in reality on this particular project, we'd agreed a price of 465. And on that price, on the advertising, there were 3 parking spaces with the property. And when we went through the conveyancing, we found that the parking spaces weren't on the title, that they actually belonged to the council. In practice, the property has had like exclusive use of the parking space for probably as long as anyone can remember, so like 10 or 20 years. But there is obviously the risk that the council could say, look, it's our space, you have to pay something for it, or whatever. It wasn't a big, so obviously we considered that and we were thinking, shall we go ahead? We consulted with the surveyor that had come and done the valuation, and we said, what's it worth without the parking? And he said, probably 10 to 15,000 you need to take off. So we went back to the vendor and said, yeah, we'll still buy it. But it's going to take longer because we've got to redo a valuation and go back to the lender, etc. And then we got it down to 450. So in reality, the motivation is obviously the vendor wanted to sell, and that potentially they put it a little too high price. But also this deal, I would say it's a really good deal, but it was a little under the radar because it was advertised by a normal agent, and it was probably advertised as a house. And so developers weren't probably specifically looking for it. And I remember actually the way that I found this at the time, because I found this specific one, I was looking for, I think, properties that had 8 or more rooms, because I was looking for properties that could be made into large HMOs or potentially, conversions of, other things. And I came across this one. So yeah, I can't remember what the question. Yeah, he's asking about the price.
Yeah, I've got a kind of another question which relates to, I guess, like fact that things took so long. But how did you control the property while you were getting planning approval and
It
lining up?
already had planning approval when we bought it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And again, that obviously does open up a lot of like possibilities. Is that sometimes when we're looking at these commercial to residential conversions, we're always exploring or having at the back of our mind, can there be some creative deal to do? In other words, can we have some option to purchase? especially if we're going to have to apply for planning. Yeah, but in this case, it's actually quite rare. In fact, I'm going to say it's very rare because it had planning in place. And generally, when you have planning in place, there are a load of conditions that have to be satisfied, sometimes in writing prior to actually starting the work. This planning has conditions, but none of which require prior written approval before going ahead with it. So on this one, basically, as soon as we get the keys, we can start the work on it. Obviously, at that time, we're also going to be going into doing all the building regs submissions and everything, but we can start breaking things and doing some initial exploratory work before we whilst we're preparing those building regs. Any other questions? Right, well, thank you all for your time. I hope that was useful. And yeah, next week we're going to be talking about pure commercial.
All right. Trevor?
Yep.
Yeah, can we have a call maybe sometime this week, yeah?
Yeah, fine. Yeah, no problem at all, Keith. Yeah.
All right, bro. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Thanks,
All right.
Trevor.
Bye.
All right, see you, everybody.
Bye.
Yes, bye.